Oh, I was about to say hello, 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 but something got caught in my throat. But it's good to be here again. I always like doing these vlog videos. I will say, before I do them, I do find a little bit of resistance of, let's just say, laziness of just my my body and my brain being like, oh, you don't have to do it today. You don't have to do it today. And you're really tired today. You just flipped tires for your workout and you overexerted yourself. But every time I come do these vlogs, even if they're not, if I'm not at 80, 90, 100%, I do feel like I get energy from them. I do feel like this is where I need to be and this is what I need to be doing, something along these lines. Not moving that, but so I'm always glad to be here. Always glad to be here. Today I just wanted to touch on what Plato has talked about as the philosopher king. And this comes up from, I was listening to Nassim Taleb's Anti-Fragility, and he talks about how he does not agree with Plato about the philosopher king, in that maybe not at the king himself, but the king ruling over a... So, actually, let me back up. So he doesn't agree with the philosopher king that Plato espouses. What this philosopher king that Plato espoused, I haven't went deep into his work, but what Nassim Taleb said is that this idea is like a captain on a boat, and on this boat, the captain has a lot of say on it, and what he says goes, and the inner workings of the ship are majorly influenced by his commands. And Plato pretty much says that you need to have philosopher kings, so kings or emperors or presidents or prime ministers who understand philosophy to be able to run these ships, as meaning governments, metaphors for governments. But what Nassim Taleb talks about is that he doesn't necessarily think that governments should be thought of as ships, more as like organic beings, like nature, right? Nature doesn't need to be controlled. It's able to be controlled on itself through its own systems and inner mechanisms. So he kind of tosses aside the argument that there should be philosopher kings, because in his mind, the system can work itself. But I want to kind of back Plato's argument, if that's what his argument is. I still want to read the Republic and understand what he's talking about. But if this is Nassim Taleb's argument, I want to piggyback off of that. And I want to say that you still do need a philosopher king. But the king, emperor, prime minister, and president isn't that figure that Nassim Taleb is thinking of. It's not that this philosopher king is the one who's dictating and the choices of how the system and government should work. I think what Plato's trying to say is that you need a philosopher king so they understand the inner workings of a system. They understand government. They understand morality. They understand individuals, and also how individuals contribute to the whole, and how the whole contributes to the individual. The inner workings, right? And if you have a king or a prime minister or someone who does study philosophy, who is thinking about these big ideas, and who has become a philosopher king, kind of like Marcus Aurelius, they inevitably come to the conclusions of that some systems don't really need your input. It doesn't need a king's input. The command of a king doesn't necessarily change how the whole system works. As a philosopher king, they can understand how the system works and then place people in different positions for them to slowly change and uh, grow the system and uh, help grow it and help improve it, rather than and being a king who has ideas that wants implemented into them first. For example, like a philosopher king wouldn't and go straight into the emperorship and try to implement all his ideas into the system, because what is that at, at showing that he's not actually trying to understand the system. He's not trying to understand the philosophy behind these great systems, as like government, for example. He wants to he or she he wants to implement whatever ideas they have onto the system, regardless of how the system works. A philosopher king wouldn't do that, or theoretically a philosopher king wouldn't do that. They would get into power and try to understand the inner workings of the system first and then go on from there. The perfect example is Marcus Aurelius, right? Being the philosopher king uh, in many circles. And one of the things he's did and exhibits this philosopher king mentality is he had his brother co-emperor with him. And I would argue you wouldn't get to that point of knowing that power or what's the saying? It's power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. You wouldn't get to that an understanding if you didn't have some intuitive knowledge of philosophy or how the world works or human beings. And you wouldn't, if you didn't have that knowledge, you wouldn't be able to implement it into your rule, all as Marcus Aurelius did by sharing power with someone else. And that's understanding humans and understanding the system, right? It's not Marcus Aurelius as implementing his own ideas and his own thinking on the world. He first comes to understand the world, understand the laws and the common laws and common patterns of the world, and then implements the necessary policies that will help him in his reign, as seen with the co-emperor. So I think I still need to read Plato's Republic and also read Plato's arguments to try to understand them and understand what he means by the philosopher king. But if Nassim Taleb's argument stands up true and his portrayal of Plato stands up true, I think this is what Plato was talking about a little bit more. Not necessarily that the king needs to influence the system directly, but the philosopher king needs to understand the system so that they can better or grow it better, or implement policies that might influence it, or also place people in certain positions where they can improve the system and go from bottom up, right? So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about with the Philosopher Kings and my kind of ideas about it and what I wanted to just think about. So thank you for listening to me again, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.